"This lobby isn't for black people. Get out." The officer's voice echoed across the courthouse lobby. Angela Brooks did not move. She sat on the wooden bench beneath the tall window, a leather folder open on her lap, reading a stack of documents filled with typed reports, numbers, and names most people in this city would rather not see printed anywhere. She turned a page slowly, as if the voice had not been meant for her. Officer Ryan Walker stood in front of her, thick shoulders, square jaw, the kind of man who had worn a badge long enough that he no longer saw people, only problems, obstacles, and threats to his authority. "I said move," he snapped. "You're in the way." Angela looked up at him calmly. Her eyes were steady, observant, taking in the nameplate, the badge number, the tension in his jaw, the impatience in the way his fingers tapped against his belt. "My feet aren't in the walkway," she said politely. "People can pass." Walker stepped closer. "You arguing with me now?" "I'm just sitting, officer." He looked around and saw people watching from the corners of their eyes. That was all it took. His pride had found an audience. "This lobby isn't for black people," he repeated, slower this time. "Get out." Angela held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked back down at her papers and turned another page. She didn't argue. She didn't move. Walker's face hardened. He reached down suddenly, shoved the folder on her lap, and pushed her shoulder at the same time. The folder slipped. Papers exploded into the air and scattered across the marble floor. Sliding in every direction, photographs, complaint forms, printed emails, bank records, interview transcripts. Her pen rolled away, spinning in a slow circle before stopping near Walker's boot. The lobby went quiet in that heavy, uncomfortable way that meant everyone was watching but pretending they weren't. Walker smirked. "Look at that," he said loudly. "Made a mess." Angela slowly stood, then lowered herself to her knees on the cold marble floor and began gathering the papers one by one. She said nothing. Her face was calm, but inside she could feel the old memory rising: a kitchen floor, a broken chair, her mother crying, her father sitting silent with a swollen eye after an encounter with a man in a uniform who had never been punished. She reached for a photograph lying near Walker's foot. Suddenly, pain exploded through her hand. Walker had stepped forward and planted his boot directly on top of her fingers, grinding her hand into the marble floor. The pressure was crushing, sharp, immediate. Angela's breath caught in her throat, but she did not cry out. Her other hand pressed against the floor to steady herself, her shoulders tightening, her jaw locking to keep the pain inside. Walker leaned slightly, pressing more weight onto her hand. "You people only learn when it hurts," he muttered. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he reached down and grabbed a fistful of her hair near the back of her head and yanked her head upward. Angela gasped despite herself, her neck forced back, her eyes suddenly level with his. "I told you to move," he said, his voice full of cruel satisfaction. "You think you can just sit wherever you want? You think the rules don't apply to you?" He shoved her head forward and released her hair, letting her fall back toward the floor. Papers crumpled under her hands as she tried to catch herself. A couple of people nearby let out small, nervous laughs, the kind of laughs people make when they're uncomfortable but too afraid to be on the wrong side of power. Someone whispered something. Someone else chuckled. No one stepped forward. Walker then kicked her hard in the side of the thigh. The force knocked Angela sideways, and she fell onto the marble floor. Her folder slipping from her arm again, papers flying everywhere, once more sliding under benches, across shoes, into the walkway. Walker laughed. "Now you're really on the floor," he said. "That's where you wanted to be, right?" Angela lay there for half a second, the world spinning slightly from the pain, the laughter, the humiliation of it. She could hear the sound of paper sliding across the floor, the quiet laughter, the echo of boots, the hum of fluorescent lights. Then she slowly pushed herself up onto her knees again. She said nothing. She simply started gathering the papers again, one by one, carefully, methodically, as if none of this surprised her, as if she had seen this before, as if she had expected it. Walker watched her for a moment, then shook his head and laughed again. "Pathetic," he muttered. Angela finished stacking the papers, her fingers shaking, her hand already swelling where his boot had crushed it. She stood up slowly, holding the folder against her chest. "Your name and badge number," she said quietly. Walker grinned immediately and tapped the badge on his chest. "Officer Ryan Walker." Badge 3174, he said. Go ahead. File a complaint. Tell them I said hello. Angela looked at his badge, then at his face. She memorized both. Thank you, she said. Walker frowned. For what? Angela met his eyes, and this time there was something cold behind her calm expression. Something he didn't understand. I needed your badge number, she said. For a second, he just stared at her. Then he laughed under his breath. Yeah, he said. Good luck with that. He turned and walked away down the hallway, his boots echoing loudly against the marble, the sound fading as he disappeared around the corner. The lobby slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed in low whispers. People avoided looking at Angela as she walked toward the courthouse doors. Holding the folder tightly against her chest, she pushed the heavy door open and stepped outside into the cool morning air. She walked down the courthouse steps slowly, her leg aching, her hand throbbing, her scalp burning where he had pulled her hair. She stopped on the sidewalk and stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the pain settle into something she could control. Then she shifted the folder into her arm and took out her phone. She scrolled once and pressed a contact. The line clicked. Read, a man answered. This is Federal Inspector Angela Brooks, she said calmly. Civil Rights Division. There was a brief pause. Angela, I thought you were starting next week. Angela turned slightly and looked back up at the courthouse building behind her, the tall columns, the glass doors, the symbol of justice carved into stone. Change of plans, she said. What happened? Reed asked. Angela looked down at her swollen hand, then at the courthouse doors. I'm standing outside Monroe County Courthouse, she said, and I think I just found the first name on our list. Reed was quiet for a moment. You're sure? Angela watched a police cruiser pull into the parking lot, its lights reflecting in the courthouse windows. Yes, she said. I'm sure. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She adjusted the folder in her arms and started walking down the street without looking back. Inside that folder were years of buried complaints, sealed reports, and forgotten names. Now there was a new name on top of the stack, Officer Ryan Walker. And this time, the file was not going to disappear. Angela Brooks did not go home after she left the courthouse. She did not go back to a hotel, and she did not go to the federal building downtown either. Instead, she drove 15 minutes east, away from the tall buildings and government offices, into the older part of the city where the streets were lined with small brick houses, auto repair shops, family diners, and churches that had been standing longer than most of the people who walked past them. The sign above the diner read Parker's Family Kitchen in faded red letters. The place had been there for over 40 years. Cops ate there. Construction workers ate there. Retired people drank coffee there for 3 hours every morning and argued about politics like it was a sport. Angela pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of coffee, fried eggs, and bacon wrapped around her immediately, warm and familiar. A bell above the door rang softly. A waitress in her 60s looked up from behind the counter. Sit anywhere you like, honey, she said automatically. Angela slid into a booth by the window and placed her leather folder on the table carefully. Her hand still hurt when she moved her fingers. The swelling had gotten worse, and a deep purple bruise had begun to spread across her knuckles. Her shin throbbed every time she bent her leg. The waitress came over with a coffee pot. Rough morning? She asked, noticing the way Angela held her hand. Angela gave a small, polite smile. Something like that. The waitress poured coffee into a thick white mug. You want the breakfast special? Eggs, bacon, toast. Can't fix the world, but it helps. Angela nodded. That sounds good, thank you. As the waitress walked away, Angela opened the leather folder again. Inside were neatly organized sections: complaint reports, medical records, photographs, financial summaries, internal memos, names of officers, dates, badge numbers. On the very top, she took out a pen and wrote a new name in clean, careful letters. Officer Ryan Walker, badge 3174. She stared at the name for a moment. Then she opened her phone and dialed again. Agent Daniel Reed answered on the second ring. Tell me you're not still standing outside that courthouse, he said. I'm at Parker's Diner, Angela replied. You remember this place? Reed chuckled softly. Yeah, bad coffee, good pie. I used to meet informants there. The coffee's still bad, Angela said, but we need to talk. Reed's tone shifted immediately. All right, I'm listening. Angela looked out the window at the street. An older man was washing his pickup truck with a hose. A woman walked past pushing a stroller. Everything looked normal. Quiet. Safe. The kind of place where people believed the police were there to protect them. I made contact this morning, Angela said. With who? Officer Ryan Walker. There was a pause on the line. I've heard that name, Reed said slowly. Patrol, 12 years on the force. A couple of excessive force complaints, but nothing that stuck. Internal Affairs cleared him every time. Angela flexed her injured hand slightly and winced. Internal Affairs didn't clear him, she said. They buried it. You got proof? I have a starting point, Angela said, and I have motive, pattern, and now I have direct interaction. What kind of interaction? Reed asked. Angela was quiet for a moment. She could still feel the pressure of the boot on her hand, the pull in her scalp, the laughter in the lobby. He assaulted a federal officer in a courthouse lobby, she said finally. That's what kind. Reed exhaled slowly. Jesus, Angela, he doesn't know who I am, she continued. To him, I'm just another black woman who didn't move fast enough. That might be the biggest mistake he ever makes, Reed said. The waitress returned with a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast, and set it down in front of Angela. You let me know if you need anything else, she said kindly. Thank you, Angela replied, then waited until the waitress walked away before continuing. I don't want to arrest him, Angela said into the phone. You don't? No, she said. If we arrest Walker, the department closes ranks. The union steps in. Internal Affairs delays everything. A year from now, he's back on the street with back pay. Reed didn't argue, because he knew she was right. So what do you want to do? He asked. Angela looked down at the folder, at the names and numbers and reports that had never made it to a courtroom. I want the network, she said. Walker is just the front. Guys like him always are. I want who's protecting him, who's signing off on the reports, who's making the complaints disappear, and where the money is going. Reed was quiet for a few seconds. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. More serious, more focused. If we go that route, this becomes a federal corruption case, he said. That means wiretaps, financial subpoenas, surveillance, confidential informants. It takes time. Angela picked up her coffee with her uninjured hand and took a slow sip. It was terrible coffee. Reed had been right about that. I'm not in a hurry, she said. I'm in this to finish it. You know what this means, don't you? Reed asked. If Internal Affairs is dirty, if supervisors are involved, if money is moving, this isn't just one cop. This could be half the department. Angela looked out the window again at the quiet street, the man washing his truck, the woman with the stroller now talking to a neighbor. Then we clean half the department, she said. Reed let out a low breath. You always did aim high. Angela allowed herself a small smile. No, she said. I aim precise. There was a pause. Then Reed said, all right. I'll talk to the U.S. Attorney's Office and start the paperwork to open a public corruption task force investigation. But Angela, once we start this, there's no quiet way out. Angela looked down at her swollen hand again, then slowly closed the folder. They were never going to let this be quiet, she said. Not after this morning. Reed understood what she meant. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. This was personal history, buried complaints, frightened witnesses, and a system that had learned how to protect itself. All right, he said. Finish your breakfast, then come downtown. We'll start building the case. Angela ended the call and set the phone down on the table. For a moment, she just sat there, listening to the low murmur of conversations around her, the clink of forks against plates, the sound of coffee being poured. Normal life. Ordinary people. The people who paid taxes, raised families, trusted the system because they had to. If you feel bad for Angela and what she went through, take a moment to like this video and tell me where you are watching from in the comments. You might find out someone near you is watching this story with you right now. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. She picked up a piece of toast and took a bite, chewing slowly. Then she opened the folder one more time and looked at the name she had written on the top page. Officer Ryan Walker. She touched the edge of the paper lightly with her finger, right next to his name. "People like you always think nobody's coming," she said quietly to herself. Then she closed the folder, finished her coffee, and reached for her coat. By the time Officer Ryan Walker started his afternoon shift, a federal investigation had already begun. He just didn't know it yet. Angela Brooks arrived at the federal building just before noon, carrying the same leather folder, now thicker with one new name written at the top. The building itself was plain and gray, the kind of place designed to look unimportant on the outside. No grand stairs, no tall columns, no marble statues. Just reinforced glass, security cameras, and a metal detector that actually worked. Inside, everything smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and old paper. People in suits walked quickly through the hallways, badges clipped to their belts, voices low, faces serious. No one shouted here. No one laughed loudly. Power in this building didn't need to prove itself. Angela stepped off the elevator on the 4th floor and walked down a narrow hallway until she reached a door that read, "Public Corruption Task Force." She knocked once. "Come in," a voice called. Agent Daniel Reed stood inside, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, a stack of files spread across a conference table. He was in his mid-50s, gray starting to show at his temples, the kind of man who looked more like a tired accountant than someone who had put city officials and police captains in prison. He looked up and saw Angela's hand immediately. "That looks bad," he said. "It'll heal," Angela replied. Reed studied her face for a second. "But you're not going to forget it." Angela set the folder on the table and opened it. "No," she said. "I'm not." Inside the room were already 3 other people. A forensic accountant named Maria Chen, a surveillance specialist named Tom Grady, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Paul Benton, a tall man with glasses and the patient expression of someone who built cases that took years, not weeks. Reed gestured to the table. "All right," he said. "Let's start." Angela slid several documents across the table, complaint reports, medical photos, printed emails, and a short list of names. "This is what we have so far," she said. Excessive force complaints connected to Officer Ryan Walker. Most of them never made it past internal affairs. Some disappeared completely. A few victims tried to file civil suits but withdrew. "Why withdraw?" Benton asked. Angela slid another paper toward him, because every time someone filed a complaint, they were suddenly arrested for something else within a month. Possession, resisting arrest, probation violation. The charges were small, but enough to scare them. Maria Chen looked up from the financial sheet she was reading. "There's money here too," she said. "Small cash deposits, regular intervals, too regular to be random." "Extortion," Reed said. Angela nodded. "Local businesses, mostly cash businesses. Auto shops, convenience stores, a bar, a laundromat. He shows up, threatens inspections, licensing issues, zoning violations. They pay him to go away." "Classic," Grady muttered. "But Walker's just a patrol officer," Benton said. "He can't bury complaints and run an extortion racket alone." "He's not alone," Angela said, and turned to another page. Sergeant Mark Nolan, Walker's direct supervisor. Every complaint against Walker went across Nolan's desk first. Reed leaned over the file. "And internal affairs?" Angela tapped another name. "Lieutenant Arthur Burke, Internal Affairs. Every investigation into Walker was ruled insufficient evidence or officer acted within protocol." Benton leaned back slightly. "So Walker hurts people and collects money. Nolan makes sure patrol looks the other way. Internal Affairs buries complaints. That's already conspiracy." Angela nodded once. "It's a system." Reed looked at her. "You said there might be a judge involved." Angela opened another section of the folder and pulled out a list of signed warrants. Search warrants, arrest warrants, probation violation warrants, a lot of them signed by the same county judge, Judge Harold Whitman, and a lot of those warrants involve people who filed complaints against Walker. Benton's expression hardened. "If a judge is knowingly signing false warrants, that's federal. That's why we don't move too early," Angela said. "If we pull Walker in now, the rest of them close ranks. We need them comfortable. We need them thinking nothing's wrong." Reed crossed his arms. "So we watch, we listen, we build financials, we flip someone." "Exactly," Angela said. Grady spoke up. "We can start surveillance on Walker immediately." Car tracker, long lens, public space cameras. If he's shaking down businesses, we'll see a pattern. Maria Chen added, I'll start tracing financial flows. If Nolan is getting a percentage, it'll show somewhere. Nobody skims cash for years without making a mistake. Benton looked at Angela. And you? Angela closed the folder slowly. I'm going to talk to the victims, she said. Not as a federal agent. Just as someone who listens. Someone they're not afraid of. Reed gave a small nod. Good, because fear is what keeps systems like this alive. There was a brief silence in the room. Everyone understood what kind of case this was. Not quick, not clean. The kind of case that ruined careers and exposed things cities tried very hard to keep hidden. Benton finally said, if we do this right, we're not arresting one cop. We're indicting a network. Angela looked around the room, then said quietly, Good. Reed studied her for a moment. You've worked cases like this before, he said. But this one feels different to you. Angela didn't answer right away. She looked down at her swollen hand, then slowly flexed her fingers. My father used to say something, she said finally. He said, the most dangerous thing in America isn't a criminal. Reed waited. It's a man who thinks the law belongs to him, Angela finished. No one in the room spoke for a moment after that. Then Reed pushed himself off the table. All right, he said. Here's what happens next. We open a formal federal public corruption investigation as of today. Walker is primary target. Nolan, Burke, and possibly Judge Whitman are secondary targets. We build extortion, civil rights violations, conspiracy, and if the money is there, racketeering. He looked at each person in the room. From this moment on, this case does not exist outside this room. Not in emails, not in casual conversations, not in local reports. If this leaks, the whole thing collapses. Everyone nodded. Reed then looked at Angela. You sure you're ready for this? Angela picked up the folder and held it against her side. I was ready a long time ago, she said. She turned and walked toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the handle. Daniel, she said without turning around. Yeah? Angela's voice was calm, but there was steel in it now. This morning, when he was standing over me, he said something, she said. He said nobody was coming. Reed didn't say anything. Angela opened the door, then paused one last second. He was wrong, she said. Then she walked out into the hallway, and behind her, in a quiet conference room on the 4th floor of a gray federal building, the case that would eventually destroy half a police department officially began. Ryan Walker started his shift at 2 p.m., the same way he had started most of his shifts for the past 12 years, by walking into the precinct like he owned the building. The Oak Ridge Police Department sat on the corner of 8th and Mercer, a square concrete building that looked more like a warehouse than a place meant to serve the public. Inside, the air smelled like old coffee, copier toner, and something metallic that never quite went away. Officers moved in and out, radios crackling, phones ringing, chairs rolling across tile floors. Walker walked through the bullpen with a cup of coffee in one hand, nodding at a few officers, ignoring others. He was in a good mood. To him, the incident at the courthouse was already over, already forgotten. Just another woman who didn't know how things worked. You see the game last night? One officer asked as Walker walked past a desk. Yeah, Walker said. Defense was garbage. He kept walking until he reached the back offices where the supervisors worked. The door to Sergeant Nolan's office was half open. Walker knocked once on the doorframe and stepped in without waiting. Sergeant Mark Nolan sat behind his desk, reading a report. He was in his late 40s, thick around the middle, hair cut short, the kind of man who spoke quietly and almost never raised his voice. That was one of the reasons he was dangerous. Men like Nolan didn't need to shout to control a room. You're late, Nolan said without looking up. Traffic, Walker replied, closing the door behind him. Nolan finished the page he was reading, then set the report down and looked at Walker. His eyes moved briefly to Walker's hands, then to his face. You hear about the new federal audit? Nolan asked. Walker leaned against the wall. Nope, don't care either. You should, Nolan said. Word is the city council is getting pressure from somewhere. Civil rights complaints, use of force reports, things like that. Walker shrugged. We get complaints every week. Yeah, Nolan said. But this time Internal Affairs is nervous. That got Walker's attention. Burke nervous? Nolan nodded once. Burke called me this morning, asked if any of my guys had incidents at the courthouse today. Walker felt a small flicker in his chest, but his face didn't change. Courthouse? Why? Apparently someone filed a complaint this morning. Assault, civil rights violation, said an officer put hands on her in the lobby. Walker snorted. People file complaints every time they don't get their way. Nolan watched him carefully. You were at the courthouse this morning. Walker took a sip of coffee. Yeah, had to drop off a report. Nolan didn't speak for a few seconds. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of phones ringing out in the bullpen. Walker, Nolan said finally, I don't care what you do out there as long as you don't make paperwork that lands on my desk looking stupid. You understand me? Walker nodded. Yeah, I understand. Nolan leaned back in his chair. Good, because if Internal Affairs starts digging, I don't know you, you don't know me. And we've never had this conversation. Walker smirked slightly. They won't dig. You don't know that, Nolan replied. So for a while you keep your head down. No extra force, no side business. Just write tickets and answer calls like a normal cop. Let things cool off. Walker didn't like being told to lie low. Lying low meant less money. But he also knew Nolan wasn't a man who repeated himself. Fine, Walker said. Couple weeks. Nolan nodded. Couple weeks, he agreed. Then he picked up the report again, signaling the conversation was over. Walker left the office and walked back into the bullpen. Rookie officers were filling out reports. One guy arguing with dispatch over the phone. Another trying to fix a jammed printer. Normal day. Normal problems. He walked to his locker, opened it, and started getting his gear together. Across the room, a young officer named Kevin Morales watched him for a moment, then looked back down at his report. Morales had only been on the force for 11 months. He still wrote everything by the book, still believed procedure mattered. Walker slammed his locker shut. Morales, he called. Morales looked up. Yeah? You're riding with me today, Walker said. Training. Morales hesitated just a fraction too long. I'm scheduled with Officer Jensen today. Walker stared at him. Not anymore. You're with me. Morales nodded slowly. Okay. Walker grabbed his radio and headed for the parking lot. Morales followed a few steps behind. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off the rows of patrol cars. Walker walked to his cruiser, tossed his coffee cup into a nearby trash can, and got in on the driver's side. Morales got in on the passenger side. Setting a small notebook on his lap, Walker started the engine. Rule number 1, he said as he pulled out of the lot. Out here, you and me, we handle things our way, not the way they teach you in the academy. Morales didn't respond right away. I thought we were supposed to follow procedure, he said carefully. Walker laughed. Procedure is what you write in the report after. They drove in silence for a few minutes, heading toward the industrial side of town where most of the small cash businesses were located. Walker finally spoke again. You ever been to Ramirez Auto Shop? He asked. Morales shook his head. No, we're going to stop by, Walker said. Routine visit. When they pulled up to the auto shop, a middle-aged man in grease-stained coveralls looked up from under the hood of a car. His shoulders dropped slightly when he saw the patrol car. Walker got out slowly, adjusting his belt, his badge catching the sunlight. Mr. Ramirez, Walker called as he walked into the garage. How's business? Ramirez wiped his hands on a rag. We're doing okay, officer. Walker walked around the car slowly, looking at the shelves, the toolboxes, the stacked tires. Morales stood near the entrance, watching, unsure what exactly this routine visit was supposed to be. Walker stopped in front of Ramirez. You got the envelope for me? He asked quietly. Ramirez glanced at Morales, then back at Walker. It's been a slow month, he said. I need a little more time. Walker's expression changed immediately. The friendly act disappeared. You don't get more time, Walker said softly. You get inspections. You get city permits reviewed. You get fire code violations. That's what you get. Morales felt his stomach tighten. He looked from Walker to Ramirez and back again. Ramirez swallowed. I can get it next week, he said. I promise. Walker stepped closer to him. You're already late, he said. Back across the street, parked in an old delivery van with dark-tinted windows, Tom Grady lowered a camera slightly and spoke into a small microphone. Target has made contact, he said quietly. Conversation appears to be about payment. In another car parked half a block away, Angela Brooks sat in the passenger seat, headphones on, listening to every word through a live audio feed. She listened to Walker's voice, calm and threatening, and watched through the long lens camera as he leaned in toward the mechanic. Angela did not speak. She just listened and watched, her injured hand resting on the folder in her lap. Next to her, Agent Reed spoke quietly into his radio. "Everybody stay sharp," he said. "This is how it starts." Angela listened without moving, her eyes fixed on the small black and white monitor mounted to the dashboard in front of her. On the screen, Ryan Walker stood inside Ramirez's auto shop, one hand resting on his belt, the other tapping slowly on the metal hood of a car like he had all the time in the world. In her headphones, Walker's voice came through clearly. "You're already late," he said again, softer now, which somehow made it worse. "And when people are late, I start thinking maybe they're trying to disrespect me." Angela watched Ramirez shift his weight from one foot to the other, the rag twisting in his hands. He looked tired, the way men looked when they worked too many hours and still couldn't get ahead. "I said I'll get it," Ramirez replied. "Next week. I just need a few more days." Walker leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You don't seem to understand how this works," he said. "I'm the reason inspectors don't come here every month. I'm the reason nobody asks questions about all these parts." He tapped a box on a shelf. "You pay for peace. That's the deal." Across the street, inside the van, Tom Grady zoomed the camera slightly, focusing on Walker's face, then on Ramirez's hands, which were shaking now. In the car half a block away, Angela closed her eyes for a moment and just listened. She had heard this conversation before. Different city, different officer, different victim. But the words were always the same. The tone was always the same. The assumption of power was always the same. Beside her, Reed spoke quietly into the radio. "We're getting clean audio. This is good." Angela opened her eyes again. On the screen, she saw Morales standing near the garage entrance. Stiff, uncomfortable, his eyes moving between Walker and Ramirez. He looked like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. "Watch the rookie," Angela said quietly. "He's not comfortable." Reed glanced at the monitor. "You think he's dirty too?" Angela shook her head slightly. "No, I think he's scared." Inside the garage, Walker's patience was running out. He suddenly grabbed Ramirez by the front of his coveralls and shoved him back against the side of the car. Tools rattled as Ramirez's back hit the metal. "Listen to me," Walker said, his voice no longer friendly at all. "You don't pay. I shut you down. I'll write you up for code violations so fast you won't even know where it came from. I'll tow every car in this lot. I'll make sure you spend more time in court than in this garage. Do you understand me?" Ramirez nodded quickly. Yes, I understand." Walker let go of him and smoothed his uniform like nothing had happened. "Good," he said. "Then we don't have a problem." Morales shifted his weight again. "Officer Walker," he said carefully, "we should probably get back in service." Dispatch called about a disturbance on. Walker shot him a look that immediately shut him up. "We're done when I say we're done," Walker said. From the car, Angela watched Morales lower his eyes and say nothing else. "That's how it spreads," Angela said quietly. "Not with bad people, with scared people." Reed nodded slightly but didn't take his eyes off the monitor. "We'll talk to him later," he said. "If he flips, he connects Walker directly to extortion and intimidation." Angela didn't respond. She just kept watching. Inside the garage, Walker started walking toward the exit, then stopped and turned back toward Ramirez. "Oh, and Ramirez," he said casually, "turn off that camera." Ramirez froze. "What camera?" Walker pointed up toward the corner of the garage where a small security camera was mounted. "That one. I don't like being recorded when I'm having private conversations." Ramirez hesitated. "It's always on. Insurance requires." Walker's expression hardened again. "Turn it off." Slowly, Ramirez walked to the wall and flipped a switch. The small red light on the camera went dark. In the van across the street, Grady muttered, "Doesn't matter. We already got what we need." Walker watched the camera for a second, then nodded and walked out of the garage toward the patrol car. Morales followed him silently. Angela watched Walker get into the driver's seat and start the engine. "Follow them," Reed said into the radio. A dark sedan pulled out from 2 cars down and merged into traffic behind the patrol car. Angela removed one side of her headphones and leaned back in her seat slightly. Her hand still hurt, a constant dull ache that reminded her of the courthouse floor, the boot, the laughter. Reed looked at her. "You okay?" Angela nodded once. "We have extortion, intimidation, and abuse of authority on recording," she said. "That's a start." "A good start," Reed said. Angela looked back at the screen, now showing only the empty garage and Ramirez standing alone, staring at the floor where Walker had been standing. "I want to talk to him," Angela said. "Ramirez?" Reed asked. "Yes," Angela said, "but not today. If we go in now, Walker will know something's wrong. We wait a day or two, then I go in alone." Reed nodded. "All right." Angela opened her folder and added another note under Walker's name. "Extortion. Ramirez Auto Shop. Recorded." She paused, then added another line. "Rookie present. Possible witness." She closed the folder again and rested her injured hand on top of it. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Yeah?" Angela looked out the windshield at the street, at people walking in and out of stores, at a city that had no idea how much of its justice system was built on fear. "He wasn't even nervous," she said. "Not for 1 second. He did all of that in broad daylight, in front of another officer, like it was normal." Reed followed her gaze out the window. "For him, it is normal," he said. "That's why we're here." Angela was quiet for a long moment. "When I was on the floor this morning," she said slowly, "and he stepped on my hand, everyone saw. Nobody said a word. Not one person." Reed didn't try to interrupt. Angela continued, her voice calm but heavy now. "That's how men like him survive. Not because they're strong, because everyone else is quiet." Reed finally looked at her. "That's going to change," he said. Angela looked back down at the folder again, at the growing list of names. "It has to," she said. In the distance, a siren wailed somewhere across the city, long and low, echoing between buildings. Angela listened to it fade, then straightened slightly in her seat. "Tomorrow," she said, "I start talking to the people he hurt." Reed nodded. "Tomorrow we start pulling the thread," he replied. Angela closed her eyes for just a second, then opened them again. And in her mind, she could still hear Walker's voice in the courthouse lobby. "Nobody's coming." She looked down at the file again and thought quietly to herself. Not this time. The next morning, Angela Brooks drove back to the industrial side of the city just after sunrise. The streets were quieter at that hour, the traffic lighter, the air still carrying a bit of the night's coolness. Most of the shops were just opening. Metal gates rolling up, lights flickering on, men with coffee cups unlocking doors and preparing for another long day of work. She parked a block away from Ramirez Auto Shop and sat in the car for a moment, watching the place from a distance. The garage door was open, and she could see Ramirez inside, already working under the hood of a car. He moved slowly, like a man who had slept badly. Angela picked up her folder, then got out of the car and walked toward the shop. The sound of a metal tool hitting concrete echoed as she stepped inside. Ramirez looked up, wiping his hands on a rag, his face automatically tense when he saw someone walk in. "Shop opens at 8, he said. "If you need something, you come back." Then he saw her face clearly. He froze. Angela stopped a few feet away, giving him space. She noticed the flicker of recognition, followed immediately by fear. "You were at the courthouse," Ramirez said quietly. Angela nodded once. "Yes." Ramirez looked toward the street, then back at her. "If this is about yesterday, I didn't see anything," he said quickly. "I don't want problems." Angela spoke calmly. "I'm not here to cause you problems, Mr. Ramirez. I'm here because you already have one." He stared at her, unsure what that meant. Angela reached into her coat and slowly pulled out her badge, holding it where he could see it clearly. "Angela Brooks," she said. "Federal Inspector, Civil Rights Division." Ramirez's shoulders dropped slightly, but the fear in his eyes didn't disappear. If anything, it got worse. "Federal?" he repeated quietly. Angela nodded. "I know about Officer Walker," she said, "and I know he's been coming here for a long time." Ramirez didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor, the rag twisting in his hands again. "I'm not wearing a wire," Angela continued. "There are no cameras in here right now. I came alone because if I showed up with agents, You'd never talk to me. Ramirez finally looked up at her. If I talk, I lose this place, he said. If I don't pay, he shuts me down. If I complain, I get arrested for something I didn't do. You understand? Angela nodded slowly. Yes, she said. I understand. She paused, then added quietly. My father was arrested 3 times for things he didn't do. Every time he tried to file a complaint, something else happened to him. So yes, Mr. Ramirez, I understand. Ramirez studied her face for a long moment, trying to decide if he believed her. He comes every month, Ramirez said finally, his voice low. Sometimes twice. Always cash. Always an envelope. If I don't have enough, he gets angry. He starts talking about inspections, permits, stolen parts. I can't afford lawyers, so I pay. How much? Angela asked. 500, sometimes 1,000 if he says he protected me from something. Angela nodded once. And Sergeant Nolan? She asked. Ramirez's eyes flickered with recognition. The tall one? Walker's boss? Yes. Ramirez hesitated. He came once, he said. Not inside. He stayed in the car. Walker gave him an envelope before they left. Angela felt a small, cold confirmation settle in her chest. How long has this been happening? 3 years, Ramirez said. Maybe more. Angela opened her folder and wrote a few notes. Then she closed it again. I need you to tell me something very important, she said. Has Walker ever hurt anyone here? Physically. Ramirez looked toward the open garage door again, like he expected Walker to appear at any moment. He hit my nephew, Ramirez said quietly. Last year. Said he was resisting when he asked why we had to pay. My nephew spent a night in jail. Charges disappeared later. But the message was clear. Angela took a slow breath. Would your nephew be willing to talk to me? Ramirez shook his head immediately. He's scared. We all are. Angela stepped a little closer, but kept her voice gentle. Mr. Ramirez, what Walker is doing is a federal crime. Extortion under color of law, civil rights violations, conspiracy. If we build this case properly, he doesn't come back. Ever. Ramirez looked at her, searching her face again, looking for any sign that she was lying. They always come back, he said. Angela shook her head slowly. Not this time, she said. Ramirez was quiet for a long moment. The only sound in the garage was the ticking of a cooling engine and a car passing outside on the street. Finally, he said, What do you need from me? Angela reached into her folder and pulled out a small card and a folded sheet of paper. I need a statement, she said. Not today. Not on paper yet. But soon. And next time he comes, if he asks for money, you give it to him. Ramirez looked confused. You want me to pay him? Yes, Angela said. But this time, the money will be marked, and we'll be watching. Legally, with a federal warrant. Ramirez swallowed slowly. And then what? Angela looked him directly in the eyes. Then we don't just arrest Walker, she said. We arrest everyone who helped him. Ramirez stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. It was a small nod, but it was the first real sign of trust. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Angela handed him the card. If anyone threatens you, if Walker shows up early, if anything changes, you call me. Day or night. Ramirez took the card like it was something fragile. As Angela turned to leave, Ramirez spoke again. Why are you doing this? He asked. Angela stopped near the garage door but didn't turn around right away. After a moment, she said, because men like him think the badge makes them untouchable. She turned then, and Ramirez could see something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before, not just determination, but something personal, something old. My job, Angela said, is to prove them wrong. She walked out into the morning light and back toward her car, the sound of the garage slowly fading behind her. Across the street, in a parked sedan, Agent Reed lowered a pair of binoculars and watched her approach. Well? He asked as she got in. Angela closed the door and set the folder on her lap. He's in, she said. 3 years of payments. Nolan is involved. We set the meet, mark the cash, and get a federal warrant for audio and video. Reed nodded slowly. Good, he said. That's very good. Angela looked down at her hand. still bruised, then out at the city waking up around them. This is where it starts to fall apart for them, she said quietly. Reed started the engine, and somewhere across the city, Officer Ryan Walker was starting another shift, completely unaware that the people he had been threatening for years were no longer alone, and that the quiet woman he had pushed, humiliated, and kicked onto a courthouse floor was now building the case that would end his career, his freedom, and the entire system that had protected him. That same afternoon, the Public Corruption Task Force met again in the small conference room on the 4th floor. This time, the blinds were closed, and a large city map was spread across the table. Red pins marked locations across the industrial district, small businesses, parking lots, side streets, and a few residential blocks. Angela stood at the table, her sleeves rolled up slightly, her injured hand still faintly swollen but functional. Reed, Maria Chen, and Tom Grady sat around the table, along with Assistant U.S. Attorney Benton, who was flipping through a legal pad filled with notes. Angela pointed to one of the red pins on the map. Ramirez Auto Shop, she said. Walker collects there once a month, sometimes twice, always near the end of the week, usually late afternoon. She moved her finger to another pin, laundromat on 5th Street. Owner reported similar payments, not officially, but off the record. Another pin, corner grocery on Mason. Same pattern. Maria Chen slid a printed spreadsheet across the table. I've been going through Walker's financials, she said. On paper, he's just a patrol officer with a normal salary. But his mortgage is almost double what his income should support, and there are regular cash deposits just under the reporting threshold. Structuring, Reed said. He's trying not to trigger bank reports. Maria nodded. Exactly. And look at this. She pointed to a column. Every time there's a large cash deposit into Walker's account, 2 or 3 days later there's a transfer out to a separate account. That account belongs to a shell LLC. Who owns the LLC? Benton asked. Maria flipped to another page. On paper, it's owned by a holding company. But the holding company is registered to a law office. And that law office represents the police union. The room went quiet for a second. So the union is laundering the money, Reed said slowly. Not officially, Benton replied, but someone inside that structure is helping move it. Angela didn't look surprised. Walker collects. Nolan supervises. Internal Affairs buries complaints. And someone helps clean the money, she said. That's the chain. Reed looked at her. We're getting close to RICO territory. Benton nodded. We already are. Extortion, conspiracy, civil rights violations, money laundering. If we connect them all, this becomes a racketeering case. Angela looked down at the map again. We need Walker on video taking money, she said. Marked bills, clear audio. No way out. Grady leaned forward. We can wire Ramirez's office, he said. Small camera, audio pickup. We get a federal warrant. It's clean. Benton nodded. I'll start the paperwork for a Title III warrant. But once we do this, we have to move fast. If anyone gets nervous, they start destroying records. Angela was quiet for a moment, then said, Walker already told Ramirez to turn off his security camera. He knows enough to be careful. But he's also arrogant. That's our advantage. Reed gave a small, humorless smile. Arrogance makes people predictable. Angela closed the folder in front of her. There's something else, she said. Everyone looked at her. The rookie, she continued. Kevin Morales. He was with Walker yesterday. He saw everything. Reed nodded. We put a quiet background check on him this morning. Clean record. Good academy scores. No complaints. Lives with his mother on the south side. No big debt. No disciplinary actions. So he's not part of it, Angela said. No, Reed replied, but he's in it whether he wants to be or not. Angela thought about the way Morales had stood in the garage, stiff, silent, watching Walker threaten Ramirez. He's scared, she said again. Benton tapped his pen on the table. If we flip him, we get an inside witness. Juries like inside witnesses. Reed looked at Angela. You want to talk to him? Angela nodded. Yes, but not here. Not officially. If Walker or Nolan even suspects Morales is talking to us, that kid's career is over before it starts. Reed thought for a moment, then said, All right, we do it careful, off the record, just a conversation. Angela looked back at the map, at the red pins marking the businesses Walker had been bleeding for years. Set up the warrant for Ramirez, she said. That's our first solid charge. Once we have Walker on federal tape taking money, we squeeze him. If he doesn't flip, we squeeze Nolan. If Nolan doesn't flip, we squeeze internal affairs. And somewhere in there, someone talks. Reed nodded slowly. That's how systems fall, he said. Angela closed her folder and rested her injured hand on top of it. No, she said quietly. That's how systems get exposed. They fall because they're rotten. Later that evening, Kevin Morales sat alone in his car in the parking lot of a small grocery store, staring at his phone. He had been sitting there for 10 minutes, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, replaying the scene at Ramirez Auto Shop over and over in his head. Walker grabbing Ramirez. Walker threatening him. The envelope. The way Walker had looked at him when he tried to speak up. Morales had joined the police because he wanted to do something good. That sounded naive now, even in his own head. But it had been true when he graduated the academy. His mother had cried at the ceremony. His uncle, a retired firefighter, had shaken his hand and told him, do the job right, even when it's hard. Morales looked down at his phone again. There was a number written on a small piece of paper on the passenger seat next to him. A number a woman had quietly slipped into his hand an hour earlier when he stopped at a gas station. If you ever want to do the right thing, call this number. He didn't even know her name, just that she had looked at him like she knew exactly what he was going through. Morales picked up the paper, stared at the number for a long moment, then picked up his phone and dialed. Angela's phone rang as she sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of her and the Walker file open again under a small lamp. She looked at the unknown number for a moment, then answered, Brooks. There was a pause on the other end. Then a young male voice said, My name is Kevin Morales. I'm a patrol officer with Oak Ridge PD. Angela sat very still and did not speak. Morales continued, his voice tight. I think I've been seeing things I'm not supposed to see. Angela glanced down at the file, at Walker's name, then back toward the dark window over her sink. Officer Morales, she said calmly. I was wondering when you were going to call. Kevin Morales sat in his car with the phone pressed to his ear, watching people walk in and out of the grocery store under the yellow glow of the parking lot lights. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. On the other end of the line, Angela Brooks did not speak for a few seconds. She let the silence sit, not as intimidation, but as space for him to decide whether he really wanted to continue. Finally, she said, You called me, Officer Morales. That means you already know something is wrong. Morales swallowed. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, he said. I just know what I saw yesterday wasn't right. Angela's voice remained calm, steady. Where are you right now? In my car. Are you alone? Yes. Good, Angela said. Listen to me carefully. From this moment on, you do not talk about this to anyone. Not your partner, not your supervisor, not your friends on the force. If anyone asks, you don't know me. You've never heard my name. Do you understand? Morales looked around the parking lot instinctively, like someone might be watching him. Yeah, he said quietly. I understand. Angela leaned back slightly in her chair, the Walker file open in front of her. Tell me what you saw, she said. Morales took a deep breath. Walker goes to these places all the time. Ramirez's shop, a laundromat, a small grocery on Mason Street. He calls them check-ins. But they're not check-ins. They're payments. Angela wrote a few notes as he spoke. How long have you known? I didn't know for sure until yesterday, Morales said. I mean, I heard things. People talk. But yesterday, he made the guy turn off his camera. Then he threatened him, said he'd shut his business down if he didn't pay. Angela nodded slightly, even though he couldn't see her. Did Walker ever give money to anyone else? A supervisor? Morales hesitated. Yeah, he said finally. I saw him hand an envelope to Sergeant Nolan once, in the parking lot behind the precinct. Nolan didn't even count it, just put it in his jacket and walked away. Angela wrote that down too. You understand what this is, Kevin? She asked. Morales let out a shaky breath. Yeah, he said. It's not just Walker. No, Angela said. It never is. There was a long pause. Morales rubbed his forehead with his free hand. If they find out I'm talking to you, I'm done, he said. Not just my job, everything. Angela's voice softened slightly, but it did not lose its strength. Kevin, if you don't talk, this continues. More people get hurt. More people pay. And one day, Walker is going to go too far with the wrong person, and someone is going to end up dead. Morales closed his eyes. My mother was so proud when I got this job, he said quietly. She tells everyone her son is a police officer. She thinks I'm out there helping people. Angela looked down at her own reflection in the dark window in front of her. Then be the police officer she thinks you are, she said. The words hung in the air between them. After a long silence, Morales said, What do you need me to do? Angela didn't answer immediately. She thought carefully before she spoke, because this was the moment that would decide everything. For now, she said, you do nothing different. You ride with Walker. You act normal. You don't warn him. You don't help him. And you don't try to be a hero. You just watch and remember. And then what? Morales asked. And then, when the time comes, you tell the truth, Angela said. Morales nodded even though she couldn't see him. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Angela added, Kevin, I'm going to be very honest with you. This is going to get worse before it gets better. When this case opens, it's going to hit the whole department like a bomb. People are going to lose their jobs. Some of them are going to prison, and some of them are going to try to blame you for it. Morales felt a chill run down his spine. Why me? Because you're the rookie, Angela said. Because you're the easiest one to sacrifice. That's how systems like this protect themselves. Morales gripped the steering wheel tighter. So why should I do this? He asked. Why should I be the one who risks everything? Angela was quiet for a long moment before she answered. When I was 13, she said slowly, my father was pulled over by a police officer on his way home from work. The officer said my father's brake light was out. My father didn't argue. He got out of the car when the officer told him to. He did everything right. Morales listened without moving. The officer pushed him against the car, Angela continued. Said he was resisting. Another officer showed up. By the time it was over, my father had a broken rib and a charge for assaulting an officer. Morales felt his chest tighten. We filed a complaint, Angela said. Internal Affairs investigated and said the officers followed procedure. The case disappeared. The officers kept their jobs. She paused. My father never trusted the police again after that, she said. But he still told me something I never forgot. He said, not all of them are bad, but the good ones stay quiet, and that's why the bad ones win. Morales stared through the windshield, seeing nothing but the reflection of the dashboard lights. So I'll ask you the same question my father asked me, Angela said quietly. What kind of officer are you going to be, Kevin? There was a long silence on the line, so long that Angela thought for a moment he might have hung up. Then Morales said, very quietly, I don't want to be like him. Angela nodded slowly. Good, she said, because very soon, you're going to have a chance to prove that. Morales took a deep breath. What happens next? He asked. Angela closed the Walker file in front of her and rested her hand on top of it. Next, she said, we set a trap. Morales felt his heart start racing again. For Walker? For Walker, Angela said. And for everyone who thinks that badge makes them untouchable. Outside Morales's car, a shopping cart rolled across the parking lot in the wind and bumped gently into the curb. He watched it for a moment, then looked down at the piece of paper with Angela's number written on it. Okay, he said, I'm in. Angela hung up the phone slowly and sat in the quiet of her kitchen for a long moment. Then she opened the Walker file again and wrote one more line under his name. Witness, Officer Kevin Morales. She closed the file, turned off the lamp, and sat there in the dark for a few seconds, listening to the silence. Somewhere across the city, Ryan Walker was finishing his shift, laughing with other officers, completely unaware that the rookie sitting next to him in the patrol car had just become the most dangerous person in his world. The plan was set in motion 3 days later. Angela stood in the small conference room with Reed, Benton, Maria Chen, and Tom Grady. The air in the room felt different now, tighter, more focused. They were past the point of theory and suspicion. Now they were moving into evidence that could put people in prison. Benton placed a document on the table. Federal warrant is approved, he said. Audio and video surveillance authorized inside Ramirez Auto Shop for the purpose of documenting extortion under color of law. We are clear to proceed. Grady slid a small black case onto the table and opened it. Inside were two tiny cameras, a microphone no bigger than a coin, and a small transmitter. These go into Ramirez's office, Grady said. One camera facing the desk, one facing the door. Microphone under the desk. We'll get face, voice, and the money exchange. Reed looked at Angela. You ready? Angela nodded once. Let's do it. That night, after the garage closed, Grady and another tech entered Ramirez Auto Shop through the back door while Angela and Reed waited in the car outside. The street was quiet, lit only by a few yellow streetlights and the glow from a liquor store on the corner. Inside the shop, Grady worked quickly and quietly, mounting the camera inside a smoke detector casing and placing the microphone beneath the wooden desk where Ramirez usually counted money. 20 minutes later, he returned to the car and nodded. We're set, he said. All we need now is Walker. Angela looked at Reed. Call Morales, she said. The next afternoon, Kevin Morales sat in the patrol car next to Walker again, trying to keep his hands from sweating. He had barely slept the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ramirez being shoved against the car and heard Walker's voice saying, "You pay for peace." Walker was in a good mood. He always was when it was collection day. We're making a stop, Walker said as he turned the wheel toward the industrial district. Morales tried to sound casual. Ramirez again? Walker smirked. Kid, you're learning. Morales forced a small smile and looked out the window so Walker wouldn't see the tension in his face. Across the street from the auto shop, the same dark van was parked again. Inside, Grady adjusted his headphones while watching the live camera feed from inside the office. The empty chair behind the desk waited like a stage before a performance. In another car down the block, Angela and Reed listened through the audio channel. Walker and Morales stepped into the garage. Ramirez looked up from a workbench, his face tightening slightly when he saw them. Afternoon, Mr. Ramirez, Walker said cheerfully. You got something for me? Ramirez nodded slowly. Yes, he said, in the office. Angela watched on the small monitor as Walker walked into the office and sat down in the chair across from the desk. Ramirez closed the door behind them. Morales stayed outside near the garage entrance, just like last time. Inside the office, Ramirez reached into a drawer and pulled out a white envelope. Walker leaned back in his chair, relaxed, like a man collecting rent on a property he owned. You see, Walker said, we don't have problems when we understand each other. Ramirez said nothing. He just placed the envelope on the desk. Walker picked it up, opened it, and flipped through the cash quickly with his thumb. The camera caught everything, his face, his hands, the money. In the car, Reed spoke quietly into the radio. We have visual confirmation of cash exchange. Angela didn't speak. She watched Walker on the screen, watched the casual way he counted the money, like this was just another part of his job. Inside the office, Walker nodded. Good, he said. See? Business stays open. Nobody bothers you. Everybody's happy. He stood up and tucked the envelope inside his jacket. Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. Same time next month, he said. Ramirez nodded. Walker turned and walked out of the office, back into the garage, and motioned for Morales to follow him. In the van, Grady removed one earphone and looked back toward Reed's car parked down the street. That's it, he said. We got him. In the car, Reed exhaled slowly. Extortion on federal tape, he said. Clean and clear. Angela kept watching the screen even after Walker left the office and the camera showed only Ramirez standing there alone, staring at the door Walker had just walked through. This is just the first domino, she said quietly. Reed nodded. Now we start pushing. That evening, back in the federal office, the team gathered again around the conference table. Grady played the video on a large screen. The room was silent as Walker appeared on the screen, took the envelope, counted the money, and put it in his jacket. Benton folded his arms. That's extortion under color of law, he said. That alone is enough to arrest him. Angela shook her head slightly. Not yet. Reed looked at her. We've got him on tape, Angela. I know, she said. But Walker is a door, not the house. If we arrest him now, Nolan shuts up. Internal Affairs destroys files, and the rest walk away. Benton considered this, then nodded slowly. So we squeeze him first. Angela pointed at the screen where Walker's face was frozen mid-frame. We show him the video, she said. We give him a choice. Talk, or take the fall alone. And if he doesn't talk? Reed asked. Angela's expression didn't change. Then we make sure he understands exactly how long a federal sentence is. Maria Chen added, and while he's deciding, I keep digging into the money. If Nolan and Burke are taking a cut, I'll find it. Reed looked around the room, then back at Angela. You were right, he said. This is bigger than one cop. Angela closed the folder slowly. It always is, she said. She stood there for a moment, looking at the frozen image of Ryan Walker on the screen, confident, relaxed, completely sure he was untouchable. He thought nobody was coming, she said quietly. Reed followed her gaze to the screen. Yeah, he said. He did. Angela picked up the remote and turned off the screen. The room went dark for a moment before the overhead lights adjusted. Now, she said, we knock on his door. The knock on Ryan Walker's door came at 6:12 a.m. It was still dark outside, the kind of early morning hour when most people were asleep and the world was quiet enough that a sudden sound felt louder than it should. Walker opened his eyes slowly, confused at first, then annoyed. He rolled over, looked at the clock, and swore under his breath. The knock came again, louder this time. Walker got out of bed, pulled on a t-shirt, and walked down the hallway of his small house, still half asleep. All right, he muttered. I'm coming. He opened the door. Angela Brooks stood on the porch, wearing a dark coat, a leather folder in one hand. Next to her stood Agent Daniel Reed, and behind them were two other federal agents. Walker blinked, trying to wake up fast enough to understand what he was seeing. His eyes stopped on Angela's face, and something flickered in his memory. A courthouse lobby, papers on the floor, a woman on her knees. You, he said slowly. Angela didn't smile. Good morning, Officer Walker, she said calmly. We need to talk. Walker looked past her at the agents, then back at her. His posture changed slightly. He wasn't fully awake 5 seconds ago, but now his instincts were kicking in. What's this about? He asked. Reed stepped forward and held up a badge. Federal agents, he said. We're not here to arrest you. We're here to give you an opportunity. Walker crossed his arms. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer. Angela nodded. That's your right, she said. But before you call a lawyer, you might want to see what we have. Walker hesitated. Just for a second, Angela saw it and knew they were already inside his defenses. 5 minutes, she said. That's all we're asking. Then you can call whoever you want. Walker looked from her to Reed, then stepped back and opened the door wider. 5 minutes, he said. They stepped inside. The house was small but neat. A television in the living room, a worn couch, a kitchen table with unopened mail stacked in a pile. Normal life, ordinary life. The kind of life that didn't look like a criminal enterprise from the outside. Angela remained standing. Reed placed a small laptop on the table and opened it. Walker leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to look relaxed. Reed clicked a key. This was recorded yesterday, he said. The video began to play. Walker saw himself on the screen, sitting in Ramirez's office, picking up the envelope, flipping through the cash, putting it into his jacket. For a moment, no one in the room spoke. The only sound was Walker's own voice coming from the laptop speakers. On the screen, Walker said, "You pay for peace. That's the deal." The video ended. Walker didn't move. He didn't speak. But something had changed in his face. The confidence was still there. But now there was calculation too. "That's illegal surveillance," he said finally. "You can't record inside a private business without a warrant." Reed reached into his jacket and placed a document on the table. "Federal warrant," he said. "Signed by a federal judge. Extortion, under color of law." Walker looked at the paper but didn't touch it. Angela stepped forward slightly. "We also have financial records," she said. "Cash deposits that don't match your salary. Transfers to a shell company. Payments connected to Sergeant Nolan, and internal affairs reports that disappeared." Walker looked at her sharply when she said Nolan's name. Angela saw it. That tiny reaction. That was the crack. You're not just shaking down businesses, she continued. You're part of a conspiracy that makes this racketeering. Federal, not departmental, not internal affairs. Federal. Walker pushed himself off the wall and walked to the table, looking down at the laptop, then at the warrant, then at Angela. What do you want? He asked. Angela held his gaze. The truth, she said, about Nolan, about internal affairs, about where the money goes. Walker laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You think I'm just going to roll over? Reed spoke calmly. No, he said. We think you're going to look at the evidence, look at the charges, and then make a smart decision. What charges? Walker asked. Benton wasn't there, but Reed knew the list by heart. Extortion under color of law, civil rights violations, conspiracy, evidence tampering, money laundering. Reed said, You're looking at federal prison, Ryan. Not a suspension, not a desk job. Prison. Walker's jaw tightened. Angela spoke again, her voice quiet but sharp. And when you go to prison, the department will say they never knew. Nolan will say you acted alone. Internal Affairs will say they investigated you and found nothing. You will be the only name on the indictment. Walker stared at her. She took one more step closer. They will bury you to save themselves, she said. Just like they buried every complaint against you. Walker's breathing had changed now. Slower. He was thinking hard. You don't have a case without me, he said. Angela shook her head slightly. We already have a case, she said. What we're offering you is a way to not carry it alone. Silence filled the room. Walker looked at the laptop again, at his own face frozen on the screen, at the envelope in his own hand. Then he looked at Angela. If I talk, he said slowly, I want a deal. Reed and Angela exchanged a quick glance. That depends on how much you know, Reed said. Walker leaned back against the table and looked down at the floor for a long moment. When he looked up again, the arrogance was still there, but now there was something else too. Fear. You have no idea how deep this goes, he said quietly. Angela didn't look surprised. Then start talking, she said. Walker was silent for a long moment. Then he said the words that would begin to bring the entire system down. It's not just Nolan, he said. Internal Affairs is dirty. And the judge signs whatever we put in front of him. We've been fixing cases for years. Angela felt a cold, heavy certainty settle in her chest. She had known it would be big, but hearing it out loud made it real. Walker looked at her and said, If I'm going down, I'm not going down alone. Angela nodded once. That, she said quietly, is exactly the point. Ryan Walker did not go to work that day. Instead, he sat in a small interview room on the 4th floor of the federal building. A paper cup of coffee in front of him. His hands wrapped around it even though he hadn't taken a single sip. The room was plain gray walls, metal table, 2 chairs, a camera in the corner. No windows. No distractions. Just a place where people told the truth when they ran out of lies. Angela sat across from him, the leather folder on the table, a recorder between them. Agent Reed stood near the wall, arms crossed, silent, letting Angela lead. Walker looked tired now. Not the physical kind of tired. The kind that comes when a man realizes the future he thought he had is gone. You said you wanted to talk, Angela said calmly. This is where you talk. Walker stared at the coffee for a long moment, then finally said, It started small. Angela didn't interrupt. 10 years ago, Walker continued. I was just patrol. Nolan was a senior officer back then. He showed me how things worked, said the city didn't pay us enough, said the businesses were making cash and not reporting half of it anyway. He called it a street tax. Angela wrote something down but kept her eyes on him. And Internal Affairs? Walker gave a short, humorless laugh. Internal Affairs doesn't investigate cops, he said. They investigate complaints, and then they make the complaints disappear. Lieutenant Burke? Angela asked. Walker nodded. Burke reviews the files. If it's minor, he clears it. If it's bad, the file gets lost, or the victim suddenly has a warrant, or the report gets rewritten. Reed spoke for the first time. Rewritten how? Walker looked at him. Resisting arrest. Aggressive behavior. Officer feared for his safety. You know the language. Angela did know the language. She had read those words in hundreds of reports across multiple cities. "And the judge?" she asked. Walker leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. "Judge Whitman signs warrants," he said. "Search warrants, arrest warrants, probation violations. Nolan brings the paperwork, Whitman signs it, no questions." "In exchange for what?" Reed asked. Walker looked back at them. "Money," he said simply. "And sometimes favors. Family members getting out of charges. Things like that." Angela felt the weight of the case growing heavier with every sentence. This wasn't just a corrupt cop. This was a machine. "How many officers are involved?" she asked. Walker hesitated. "Directly? Maybe 6 or 7, he said. "But more no. They just don't ask questions." "The blue wall," Reed muttered. Walker nodded. "You don't report another cop. That's rule number 1. You keep your mouth shut. You get good shifts, overtime, easy assignments. You talk, your career is over." Angela leaned forward slightly. "And the money," she said. "How much are we talking about?" Walker shrugged slightly. "Walker level. Maybe 3,000-4,000 a month. Nolan gets a bigger cut. Burke gets paid to keep files clean. Whitman gets paid per warrant. When it's something sensitive." Angela wrote that down. The numbers didn't just represent money. They represented years of fear, of people paying to avoid being destroyed by the very people who were supposed to protect them. "Names," she said. "I need names." Walker looked at her for a long moment. "If I give you names, I want that deal," he said. Reed stepped forward. "You don't get to negotiate the charges," he said. "But if you cooperate fully, the U.S. attorney will take that into account." Walker looked back at Angela. "You promise me I'm not the only one going down," he said. Angela held his gaze. "I promise you," she said. "Everyone who did this is going to answer for it." Walker believed her. He didn't know why, but he did. So he started talking. He gave them names of officers who helped with arrests when business owners didn't pay. He explained how reports were written to justify force. He described how Nolan kept a notebook with payment amounts. He explained how Burke flagged certain complaints so they would never be entered into the system. He described envelopes left in a mailbox behind a bar twice a month money that eventually moved into accounts that looked legitimate on paper. For 3 hours, Walker talked. Angela barely spoke, only asking questions when she needed clarification. Reed took notes. The recorder captured every word. By the time Walker finished, the small interview room felt heavier, like the air itself was carrying the weight of everything that had just been said. Walker leaned back in the chair, exhausted. "That's everything," he said quietly. Angela closed the folder slowly. "No," she said. "That's the beginning." Walker looked at her, confused. Angela stood up. "What you just gave us is probable cause for multiple federal indictments," she said. "Extortion, conspiracy, racketeering, civil rights violations, money laundering. This is not a bad cop case anymore, Ryan. This is an organized crime case." Walker swallowed. Reed opened the door, and Agent Benton stepped in with a stack of papers. He placed them on the table. "Ryan Walker," Benton said, "based on your cooperation and the evidence obtained, a federal grand jury is being convened. If you continue to cooperate, the U.S. Attorney's Office will consider a reduced sentence recommendation." Walker nodded slowly. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in one morning. As Walker was escorted out of the room by another agent, Angela gathered her folder and stepped out into the hallway. Reed followed her. "Well," Reed said quietly, "you were right. It's the whole system." Angela looked down the hallway at the rows of closed office doors. "It always is," she said. Reed leaned against the wall. "Grand jury will move fast once they see this," he said. "Search warrants, arrests, financial seizures. Nolan, Burke, maybe even Judge Whitman." Angela nodded, but she didn't look satisfied. She looked thoughtful, heavy. Reed noticed. "What is it?" he asked. Angela was quiet for a moment before answering. "This morning," she said. "When we knocked on Walker's door, he looked surprised. Not scared. Surprised. Like consequences were something that happened to other people." Reed nodded slowly. "That's what power does to people," he said. It makes them forget the rules apply to them too. Angela looked down at her hand again, the bruise now fading from deep purple to yellow. He stepped on my hand like I was nothing, she said quietly, like I didn't matter. Reed didn't say anything. Angela closed the folder and looked back up. Now he knows, she said. He was wrong. The arrests began on a Tuesday morning. At 5 a.m., while most of the city was still asleep, federal agents moved quietly through the streets with sealed warrants in hand. Unmarked cars stopped in front of neat suburban homes, small apartment buildings, and one large brick house on a quiet street where a county judge had lived for nearly 20 years. Sergeant Mark Nolan opened his front door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair messy, his face still heavy with sleep. He saw the badges, the jackets with large yellow letters, and he didn't say a word. He just closed his eyes for a second like a man who had always known this day would come, just not when. Lieutenant Arthur Burke from Internal Affairs was arrested in his driveway as he was getting into his car. He tried to ask what this was about, but the agent simply said, "You know what this is about." Judge Harold Whitman was arrested last. 2 federal agents walked into his house, showed the warrant, and gave him time to put on a suit. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. Men like him understood the system, and he understood what it meant when the system arrived at his own door. By noon, the news was everywhere. Local police sergeant arrested in federal corruption probe. Internal affairs officer charged with evidence tampering. County judge indicted in bribery and racketeering case. Television vans lined the street outside the federal courthouse. Reporters spoke into cameras, using words like systemic corruption, civil rights violations, and federal racketeering charges. Inside the same courthouse where, just days earlier, Angela had been on her knees picking up papers while people laughed. Things felt very different now. Angela walked through the lobby slowly, wearing a dark suit, her federal badge clipped to her belt. People moved out of her way without being asked. Some of them recognized her from the news. Some of them didn't, but they saw the badge, and that was enough. Near the entrance, she saw a familiar face. Kevin Morales stood near one of the benches, wearing his uniform, his hat in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept much in the past few days, but when he saw Angela, he stood up straighter. "Ma'am," he said. Angela stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "It's done, isn't it?" Morales asked quietly. Angela nodded once. "It started," she said. "There's still a long way to go. Trials. Testimony. More arrests maybe. But the hard part is over." Morales looked down at his hat, turning it in his hands. "Everyone at the precinct is going crazy," he said. "Some people are saying the department's finished. Some people are saying the feds are the enemy. Some people are saying, I did this." Angela watched him carefully. "And what do you think?" she asked. Morales was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I think, if we didn't do this, then we're not really police," he said. Angela nodded slowly. "That's the right answer," she said. Morales let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for days. "I was scared," he admitted. "I'm still scared." Angela's voice softened slightly. "Being scared doesn't make you weak," she said. "Staying quiet when you know something is wrong, that's what makes the system rot." Morales nodded. After a moment, he said, "My mom watched the news this morning. She called me crying. She said she was proud of me." Angela allowed herself a small smile. "Good," she said. "You should remember that when this gets difficult later." Morales looked at her. "Why did you come back here today?" he asked. "You don't have to be here." Angela looked around the lobby. The same marble floor. The same wooden benches. The same tall windows. Just a few days ago, she had been on that floor, her hand under a boot, her papers scattered while people looked away. "I came back because this is where it started," she said. At that moment, the elevator doors opened, and 2 federal agents walked out escorting Ryan Walker in handcuffs. He was wearing a suit now, not a uniform. His hands were cuffed in front of him, and there was no arrogance left in his face, only a tired, hollow look. As they walked him across the lobby, Walker looked up and saw Angela standing there. He stopped walking. The agent holding his arm gave a small tug. "Keep moving." But Walker kept his eyes on Angela. For a long moment, the entire lobby seemed quiet again, just like the day he had told her to get out. Walker looked at her, then slowly lowered his eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Angela held his gaze for a second longer, then stepped aside so the agents could lead him to the elevator. As the elevator doors closed, Morales exhaled quietly. "I still can't believe it," he said. Angela watched the closed elevator doors for a moment. "Power makes people think they're untouchable," she said. "But power doesn't erase consequences. It just delays them." She turned and walked toward the courthouse doors. Morales walked beside her. Outside, reporters were talking into cameras, people were watching from across the street, and the city was buzzing with the news that people who were supposed to enforce the law had been breaking it for years. At the top of the courthouse steps, Angela stopped. Morales looked at her. "What happens now?" he asked. Angela looked out at the city, at the traffic, the buildings, the people who would never know her name but would live in a city that was a little more honest than it had been a week ago. "Now," she said, "now we go find the next one." Morales nodded slowly. Angela started down the steps, then stopped after a few steps and looked back at the courthouse one last time. Just a few days ago, she had walked out of those doors with a bruised hand, a torn folder, and a new name written at the top of a list. Today, that name was on a federal indictment. She turned and continued down the steps, disappearing into the movement of the city, just another person in a crowd. But behind her, inside that courthouse lobby, something had changed. And this time, everyone had seen it. The story reminds us that justice does not always arrive loudly, and it does not always arrive quickly, but it must arrive. Power can make people believe they are untouchable, that a badge, a title, or a position puts them above the law. But true justice depends on ordinary people who choose courage over silence. One person who refuses to look away, one person who tells the truth, and one person who stands up at the right moment can bring down an entire system built on fear and abuse. The lesson is simple but powerful. Evil often grows when good people stay quiet, but justice begins the moment someone decides to speak. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real, and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.